I thought he was my best friend until I found him in my bed with my wife. There are moments in life you never imagine for yourself until they come crashing down around you. I'm Matt, 32, and I'm here to try and sort through the wreckage of what used to be my marriage. For 5 years, I was married to Sophie. We met back in college at one of those chaotic campus parties where everyone seemed to come together. She was standing by the punch bowl, talking animatedly to a friend, her eyes sparking as she spoke about her passion for marine biology. We struck up a conversation, which flowed into a friendship, and over time, something much deeper. Our college days were spent studying together, sharing coffee breaks, and hanging out with a circle of friends. We had this easy, comfortable camaraderie, and though I'd been harboring feelings for her, I was too worried about risking our friendship to say anything. But during our senior year, at a beach bonfire, everything changed. We were sitting by the fire, the waves quietly rolling in the background, when Sophie turned to me and said, I think I'm falling for you." My heart leapt, relief and joy swirling through me. I'd been waiting for this moment, and from that point on, we were inseparable. We both found jobs in the same city after graduation. I started working at a marketing firm, while Sophie pursued her dream job at the local aquarium. After a year of dating, we moved in together, squeezing into a cramped one-bedroom apartment that barely held all our things. But it didn't matter. We were happy, building a life together day by day. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. I wanted it to be special, so I planned a scavenger hunt across the city, hitting all our favorite spots and ending at the aquarium. There, in front of a massive shark tank, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She said yes, barely letting me finish. Our wedding was a day filled with laughter and celebration, surrounded by the people we loved most. My best friend Mark, whom I'd known since high school, was my best man. He and I had bonded over late-night basketball games and a mutual love for bad sci-fi movies. Having him there, standing beside me as I married Sophie, felt like the final piece of the life puzzle I'd dreamed of. For a while, life was good. We bought our first house, a cozy little 3-bedroom with a backyard where we imagined our future children playing. We spent weekends together doing little home projects, dreaming about what our life would look like in the years to come. Mark was a constant in our lives, practically family, dropping by regularly for dinner or weekend trips. I never once suspected anything was amiss. I was actually grateful that Sophie and Mark got along so well. About a year ago, we decided it was time to try for a baby. We'd always wanted a family, and we finally felt ready. We were excited, talking about names and what our children might look like. But after several months of trying with no luck, worry began to creep in. Sophie became fixated on tracking ovulation, and what had once been a loving, spontaneous intimacy began to feel like a scheduled chore. Despite our efforts, nothing happened. After a year, we went to see a fertility specialist, and that's when we got the news that changed everything. The specialist, Dr. Johnson, was kind but honest. She told us I had a low sperm count, which would make conceiving naturally difficult. The weight of that news hit me hard. I felt as if I'd failed, not just Sophie, but the dreams we'd shared. I struggled with feelings of inadequacy, a sense that I was letting her down in the worst possible way. Sophie assured me that it didn't change how she felt, but I could sense her disappointment beneath the comforting words. We decided to keep trying, following Dr. Johnson's recommendations to make some lifestyle changes and try different supplements. But as we navigated this challenging time, Sophie seemed to drift away. She'd work late more often and seemed glued to her phone, always texting someone. I brushed it off, thinking it was stress from work and our situation. Mark, in the meantime, was more present than ever. He'd drop by with dinner when Sophie worked late, or take me out for a drink when I was feeling down. I leaned on him during that time, grateful to have such a supportive friend, though I now wonder how I could have missed the truth. Last week, everything fell apart. I'd left work early, wanting to surprise Sophie with flowers and take her out for dinner. As I parked in our driveway, I saw Mark's car outside. My first thought was that he must have dropped by to hang out. But as I stepped inside, I heard noises from upstairs. My heart raced, an inexplicable dread filling me. Quietly, I went up the stairs, and when I pushed open our bedroom door, I felt my world crumble around me. Sophie and Mark were there, lost in each other, oblivious to my presence until I must have made a sound. They looked up, and the horror on their faces mirrored my own. I turned and walked out, their voices fading as I stumbled down the stairs and got back into my car. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind looping through what I'd seen. By the time I returned home, it was late. Sophie was waiting, her eyes swollen from crying. She tried to explain, to apologize, but her words were just a blur. Through her tears, she confessed everything. She and Mark had been seeing each other for 6 months. But that wasn't the worst of it. With a shuddering breath, she told me she was pregnant and the baby was his. I was numb. There was no other way to describe it. The irony of it was cruel. After all the months of us trying to start a family, the child we had dreamed of was now growing inside her, but it wasn't mine. For days after Sophie's confession, I felt like I was sleepwalking through my life. I moved out of the house and stayed in a hotel, barely able to process the betrayal. Sophie bombarded me with calls and texts, pleading for another chance. She claimed she'd felt lonely, vulnerable over our fertility struggles, that her affair with Mark just happened. Her words only deepened my sense of disbelief. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had been shattered. Mark reached out too, leaving messages filled with apologies and offers to make things right. But his words were meaningless now. The friend I trusted like a brother had cut me to the core, and nothing he said could undo that. They both claimed their relationship had felt safe since they thought there'd be no consequence due to our fertility struggles. The irony was painful, and their self-serving logic sickened me. My family became my lifeline during those initial, chaotic days. My younger sister Rachel checked on me daily, bringing food and offering a shoulder to lean on. My parents gave me a room in their house, allowing me the space to process, while also helping me find a lawyer. Within days, I knew what I had to do: file for divorce. The betrayal was too deep, too raw for me to see any future with Sophie. It wasn't just the affair. It was the constant lying and deceit. The paperwork felt like a physical weight, a final blow to the life I'd believed in. Sandra, my lawyer, was firm and compassionate, helping me navigate the complexities. Sophie, to my surprise, tried to fight the divorce, insisting we could rebuild. She even suggested couples counseling, but I couldn't imagine trusting her again. I remained firm, rejecting every plea and every offer she made. Cutting ties with Mark was also a painful process. He didn't make it easy, even showing up on my parents' doorstep once, hoping to talk. Standing there, he looked remorseful, pleading, but seeing him only stirred fresh anger. I told him I wanted nothing more to do with him, then blocked his number and social media. The man who'd once been my closest friend now felt like a stranger, and I couldn't stand the sight of him. Then there was Sophie's pregnancy. She was about 4 months along, and her belly was beginning to show. Seeing her in public, visibly carrying Mark's child, cut through me. The family we had planned, the child we had dreamed of, it had all slipped through my hands. Sophie asked if I'd reconsider, saying we could raise the baby together. But the thought of raising Mark's child was unbearable. The idea of having a child with her had once felt like a dream, but now was a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. Work became my refuge. My boss, John, understood the strain I was under, letting me adjust my schedule for legal and therapy sessions. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, was another anchor, guiding me through the pain and confusion. I vented my thoughts about Sophie, Mark, and even the unborn child, sharing everything that had been bottled up. She urged me to reconnect with friends and reminded me I was not defined by this betrayal. She helped me see that, no matter what, I could still rebuild. Physical activity became another outlet for my frustration. I threw myself into working out, finding solace in the steady rhythm and the demands on my body. Each workout, each session became a reminder that I was still strong, that I could persevere and redefine myself. My sister Rachel and a few close friends helped me search for a new apartment, a space that would be mine alone, a small step toward a fresh start. Months passed, and Sophie was now 6 months pregnant, her belly unmistakable. One day, she sent me a copy of the ultrasound image. I hadn't expected the rush of feelings, sadness, anger, and a sense of loss for the child I'd once imagined. Although I stood firm on the divorce, seeing that photo was painful. Part of me still yearned for the life Sophie and I had planned, and this child, though not mine, represented everything I thought I'd have. In a chance encounter one morning, I ran into Mark at a coffee shop. It was our first face-to-face since I'd learned of the affair, and his presence dredged up every possible emotion. Hurt, anger, even a lingering sadness for the friendship I'd lost. He looked like he wanted to speak, but I couldn't bear it. I left fighting the flood of memories. Once, we had shared everything. Now, every memory felt tainted. Finally, I found an apartment and moved in. It was a modest one-bedroom, but it felt like a space where I could begin again. Rachel and some friends helped me settle in, unpacking boxes and decorating, which made the process feel less daunting. The adjustment to living alone was strange after so many years with Sophie, but I also felt relief, a newfound freedom. A few weeks later, I took a tentative step back into dating. A colleague introduced me to Emily, a friend of hers. We'd only been on a few dates, and I was cautious, almost guarded. But Emily was kind and respectful of my need to move slowly. Being with someone who wasn't a part of my past felt refreshing, and I could almost glimpse the possibility of trust again, the chance for joy without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. Work continued to be a much-needed distraction. I received a promotion, which added new challenges and kept my mind occupied. This progress was a small, reassuring reminder that I could still build a meaningful life, that my self-worth didn't hinge on what I'd lost. My family remained a constant source of comfort. Weekly dinners became a tradition, providing a warmth and consistency I hadn't realized I'd needed. Being around people who loved me unconditionally helped me feel grounded. I started to see that even though Sophie and Mark had betrayed me, I was not without love or support. As Sophie's due date neared, I found myself thinking about the baby more than I wanted to. Would it resemble Sophie, or maybe Mark? And would it grow up knowing about me, the man who'd been meant to be its father? Part of me even considered whether, one day, I might want contact with the child. Dr. Martinez and I discussed setting boundaries that would allow me to make that choice in the future if I wanted to. The decision didn't have to be made now, but knowing I had some control brought me a measure of peace. As the final stages of the divorce loomed, I was slowly finding some footing, though reminders of my old life felt closer than ever. Sophie was nearly full term by now. I'd hear about her from mutual friends, and each update left a strange ache in my chest. The life we'd planned together had unraveled, but some part of me still felt connected to the future I thought we'd have. With each passing week, I tried to focus on the present, throwing myself into work and new activities. Moving into my own apartment had given me a sense of independence and freedom, a chance to build a space that was just mine. Rachel visited often, bringing laughter and light, making me realize just how much I'd leaned on the life I'd shared with Sophie. Reconnecting with people beyond my old routines reminded me of who I was before my marriage and betrayal. I was rebuilding one small step at a time. One afternoon, Sophie and I crossed paths in a grocery store. She looked different, heavily pregnant, with a mix of surprise and regret in her eyes as she spotted me. I managed a polite greeting, but everything felt strained and unfamiliar, as if we were strangers. She tried to apologize again, bringing up the baby, but I stopped her, telling her I had made my peace. I left quickly, the memory of our shared life and the reality of her betrayal colliding in my mind. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the last of the paperwork, I felt a bittersweet relief. The life I'd built with Sophie was officially over, yet signing those papers was also an act of taking back control. I could finally begin again. Memories of the life we'd shared passed through my mind as I signed, but I focused on the decision to move forward, grateful that this painful chapter was coming to a close. Shortly after the divorce, Sophie gave birth to a baby boy. I struggled with whether to see the child or not, torn between the attachment I'd felt to the family we'd once dreamed of and the reality of what had happened. Eventually, I chose to visit briefly, hoping it would bring closure. Seeing the baby brought a strange calm, a mix of sadness, peace, and the lingering ache of lost dreams. Holding him for that brief moment allowed me to say goodbye to what might have been. I left with a sense of finality, ready to turn the page for good. Mark reached out again not long after, asking for a meeting to clear the air. I was unsure, but part of me wanted to confront the past face to face. We met at a coffee shop, and the conversation was filled with tension and hurt. He apologized, trying to explain what had happened, and spoke of the bond we'd once had. But nothing could take back what he'd done. I told him I was determined to move on, but didn't foresee any future where we could be friends again. Although forgiveness still felt out of reach, walking away from that conversation felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. In the weeks following, I committed to rebuilding my life on my terms. I took up new activities like rock climbing and photography, which filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. Rock climbing pushed me, helping me prove to myself that I could overcome challenges. Photography, meanwhile, gave me a sense of calm and a way to see beauty in small moments. These hobbies became grounding forces, reminding me that there was more to life than what I'd lost. My connection with Emily continued to grow. She was patient and kind, and spending time with her became a bright spot in my weeks. She didn't pry or ask for more than I was ready to give. Her understanding allowed me to see that companionship could exist without pain or betrayal. Together, we created new memories, which helped me realize I could find happiness again. Slowly, I was rebuilding my confidence and trust, one day at a time. Work became another steadying force. My recent promotion provided new challenges, and I threw myself into leading projects, finding satisfaction in professional achievements that had nothing to do with my personal life. The support from my colleagues and the sense of purpose in my work were reminders that I was still capable of achieving my goals, even after everything I'd been through. My family continued to be a bedrock for me. Weekly dinners with my parents and Rachel became a tradition, a constant source of warmth and connection. Rachel was expecting her first child, and the thought of becoming an uncle brought real joy, a reminder that life could move forward, that happiness could grow from unexpected places. Being around family who loved me without conditions helped me feel grounded and valued in ways I hadn't realized I needed. In these quiet, steady ways, I was learning to face the future with a growing optimism. The pain of betrayal was still there, though no longer an open wound, but a fading scar. I had been through one of the darkest periods of my life, but I'd come out of it with a newfound resilience. While some days were still difficult, the good days were growing more frequent. For the first time, I could picture a future free from the shadows of my past. The journey hadn't been easy, but each step forward felt like a small victory. I was rediscovering who I was, building a life defined not by betrayal, but by strength and the people who had been there for me through it all. The future was still unknown, but I felt prepared to face it with courage, finally ready to open a new chapter on my own terms. As months passed, I found myself embracing a life I had once feared would be impossible after everything with Sophie and Mark. The wounds they'd left still existed, but I was beginning to feel whole again, piecing together a future based on my own terms. Emily and I grew closer, each step careful and intentional. Her patience was a gift I hadn't anticipated, and with her, I rediscovered trust and companionship, realizing that my past didn't have to define my future. Work continued to anchor me, providing a sense of purpose and stability. My promotion had added a new layer of responsibility, and I poured myself into projects that gave me a sense of accomplishment. Completing each project felt like proof that I could succeed on my own. The job also gave me the structure I needed, keeping me focused and engaged as I worked to rebuild. Around this time, Rachel gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I was thrilled to become an uncle, and holding my niece for the first time was a powerful reminder that life moved forward, that joy could emerge in unexpected places. Seeing Rachel and her husband with their newborn filled me with happiness, and the weekly family dinners became a comforting tradition, a constant in a time of change. I realized that family had been my rock, always there with love and support, grounding me when everything else felt unsteady. One afternoon, while hiking with Emily, I reflected on how much had changed. The air was crisp, and the scenery around us was peaceful, untouched by the past year's turmoil. I felt a new confidence that I hadn't had in a long time. And as we walked, I opened up to Emily more deeply, sharing the details of the betrayal, the hurt, and the uncertainty I'd felt after Sophie's pregnancy. She listened, offering comfort without judgment, reinforcing that I wasn't alone. Rebuilding life after betrayal had been a longer journey than I could have anticipated. I'd gone through stages of anger, grief, and eventually acceptance. Yet now, I realized I had found something I didn't know I was looking for, an inner strength that carried me forward. I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. I was defined by the resilience that had allowed me to heal, to move forward, and to believe in myself again. Mark attempted to reach out once more, but this time, I didn't feel the same rush of anger or hurt. I no longer needed to confront him to feel whole. I knew I had made peace with what had happened, and holding on to any lingering bitterness would only hold me back. Instead, I let it go, choosing not to respond and leaving that chapter firmly closed. Photography and rock climbing continued to bring me joy. Every hike, every climb, and every photo helped me see the world through new perspectives, capturing moments of beauty and resilience. These hobbies gave me a quiet sense of accomplishment, a reminder that life held joy even in its simplest forms. Looking at my photos, I often reflected on how far I had come, a tangible representation of the inner work I had done to heal. The divorce had left me unsure if I'd ever feel like myself again. But here I was, with Emily by my side and a future that felt open and hopeful. My family, my job, and the small victories of each day had become the foundation of a new life that I was genuinely excited about. For the first time, I saw my journey not just as a painful story, but as a testament to my ability to rebuild. I knew the past would always be part of my story, but it didn't define me. The betrayal, as painful as it had pushed me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. I'd gained a new understanding of myself and the strength I held within, and I was ready to carry that strength forward, wherever the future might take me.